Hello everyone, and welcome to Right Wing Rising. Please be sure to like this video down below before you are finished watching, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So, I have to make a quick video today about probably the most important primary election this cycle that is taking place tomorrow over in Virginia's 5th Congressional District, between the incumbent U.S. Representative in that seat, Bob Good, against his challenger, John McGuire. For those of you who have not heard of him before, Bob Good is the leader, the chair of the House Freedom Caucus in the United States Congress. He is one of, if not the most conservative member in all of Congress. He was one of the 8 Republicans that ousted Kevin McCarthy from the speakership last year. And he also faced backlash from Donald Trump by endorsing Ron DeSantis in the 2024 GOP presidential primaries, which was a little bit of a questionable strategic move on the part of Bob Good and other members of the House Freedom Caucus, because that caucus is comprised of some of the most conservative members in the House of Representatives. And while it made some sense that Bob Good and some other Freedom Caucus members endorsed DeSantis, since he aligned more closely with them on some policy positions such as social conservative issues, it was all but evident, even from very early on in the primaries, that Donald Trump would once again win the nomination, since DeSantis' campaign never really took off and was very poorly run. So politically, it was a very poor choice to associate with that campaign. Instead of Donald Trump's, who would go on to resoundingly win the nomination, has run a very strong campaign overall, and is in a very good position to win the general election this November. Even more so when you consider that loyalty is very important to Donald Trump, so it was taking a risk by endorsing his challenger if that challenger did not win, because it was basically a guarantee that Republican political figures that endorsed DeSantis, Haley, and others against Trump would incur the ire of Trump. And that is what has happened here with Bob Good. But it is a very foolish decision by Donald Trump to back Bob Good's challenger, John McGuire, because the former state senator is not anything special, and he is simply being backed and propped up by Kevin McCarthy to oust Good as a revenge campaign by McCarthy to remove the people that ousted him from the speakership. And there have also been other members of Congress that endorsed DeSantis and switched their endorsement to Trump once DeSantis dropped out, just like Bob Good did, might I add, and Trump went on to endorse those people. I just think he has it out a little bit more for Bob Good because most of the Freedom Caucus sided with DeSantis in the presidential primaries. But Trump needs to look past his ego here because the House Freedom Caucus, as I mentioned, is very conservative on a whole host of issues. And the majority of its members are strong allies of Trump today, and also were strong allies of him when he was president, backing up his legislative agenda in Congress. So Trump needs to get over the fact that they endorsed a challenger to him in the primary, which they had every right to do. It's okay to say that you support Donald Trump, but also maybe want to see someone else run, someone younger like DeSantis. It's not like Bob Good and the other members of the Freedom Caucus are still sitting here pining away for Ron DeSantis. By and large, they are very on board with Donald Trump being the next nominee, since they overall share the same conservative agenda. So it is very important that Trump's bad endorsement in this race be defeated, that he be rebuked, and that Bob Good survive and serve another term in Congress because he is one of the better representatives. We can take a look at his voting record here, and we can see that he has a perfect score from 5 conservative groups: Numbers USA, Americans for Prosperity, the Family Research Council, the Heritage Foundation, and the Conservative Review. And we can just scroll through all the bills he's proposed or passed, sponsored, co-sponsored, co-authored, on a whole range of issues: immigration, government reform, education, election integrity, the pro-life issue, the Second Amendment, pushing back against COVID restrictions, combating China, labor unions, healthcare. The list goes on and on and on. He is comprehensively one of the best representatives in Congress. There really is no issue, from social conservative policy positions to foreign policy, immigration, the economy, constitutional rights. He's good on everything. And Donald Trump likes to talk about draining the swamp, and Bob Good did more to drain the swamp by ousting Kevin McCarthy than anyone has done in a long, long time. That action was carried out by Bob Good and 7 other House Republicans to show voters that they were actually serious about governing and doing what Republican voters sent them to Congress to do. They gave them the House majority in 2022 to get things passed, to push back against the Biden administration. And Kevin McCarthy was doing nothing, really, slow walking everything and not getting anything major accomplished, and always folding in different negotiations for different pieces of legislation to the point that no conservative priorities were getting done. He wasn't using the leverage he had in the House. And by getting rid of him, those Republicans in the House showed the voters that, hey, we're actually serious about getting a leader that will actually allow us to use the power granted to us by you, the voters, having the House majority, and use it as leverage to actually, if not be able to get things accomplished since the Democrats still control the presidency and the Senate, stop liberal priorities from getting passed, and use the leverage where you can use it. And while Mike Johnson has been controversial as Speaker, and definitely has had some blind spots, the one thing you can say for him is there was no new Ukraine aid for 6 months, something that would not have happened under McCarthy. He was ready to pass it back in October, which is why he got ousted. And Mike Johnson also stopped amnesty and a horrible immigration bill from being passed earlier this year, something that I also question if McCarthy would have done. McCarthy probably would have brought it to the floor and said, oh, we'll have a vote on it, whereas Mike Johnson just blocked it from coming to the floor and stopped the likelihood of some Republicans crossing over with Democrats to make sure that the bill passed. So even if Johnson hasn't been perfect, there still was some good to come out of the McCarthy ouster. And Bob Good has been endorsed by a lot of people that are very, very conservative. Most of the House Freedom Caucus is backing him. Some state legislators that are very conservative in Virginia. Rand Paul from the United States Senate. Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff to Donald Trump, in fact, and a former U.S. representative from North Carolina. And conservative groups such as the Club for Growth is funding Bob Good. Meanwhile, John McGuire really just has Donald Trump and Kevin McCarthy behind him, some other rhinos, and 1 or 2 defectors from the House Freedom Caucus that are just trying to hedge their political bets by siding with Donald Trump in this election. Virginia voters need to realize that John McGuire brings nothing new to the table. As I mentioned, he was a mediocre state senator. He is being used as a tool of Kevin McCarthy to oust Bob Good in a revenge tour, and only being endorsed by Donald Trump because he's salty at Bob Good and the House Freedom Caucus members, mainly endorsing Ron DeSantis. This has nothing to do with policy. I'm sorry, John McGuire has rhino written all over his face, and he will guaranteed be a downgrade over Bob Good if he is to win the nomination. Bob Good has a 100% conservative voting record. He is an awesome representative for Republican voters from Virginia in Congress. And I really am not overstating this by saying this is the most important primary election of the cycle, in my opinion. It would be a huge, huge negative if Bob Good does not win renomination and continue to serve as the head of the House Freedom Caucus, in a rebuke to Kevin McCarthy, the establishment, and of the bad endorsement from Donald Trump. It's going to be a tight race, though, because if we scroll down here, Bob Good and John McGuire are really fundraising evenly. McGuire has actually raised about $100,000 more than Bob Good as the incumbent. But Bob Good is outspending him by about $200,000, so he has that edge. But the polls we can see are really just alternating back and forth. Now, most of these are internal polls from either campaign, but we still can see that both candidates have led 2 polls each. So it's going to be a very, very close race. And I really pray and hope that Bob Good is able to pull this out tomorrow in Virginia's 5th district. Because we would be going from a conservative champion in the seat to someone that tweeted out 5 days after Joe Biden and Kamala Harris got inaugurated how awesome it is that we finally have the first female VP, which I really do not think was a thought on any conservative's mind back in January of 2021. And as simple of a tweet as this seems at surface level, it just shows that John McGuire would be a speed bump for the Democrats and the establishment. Too busy trying to play nice, even though those same Democrats, now in the White House, are doing their best to put Donald Trump behind bars for daring to even oppose them. This administration has made a mess of our country, our economy, trample on our rights, and goes after anyone that opposes it and the liberal, immoral policies that it pushes with an iron fist. I don't think many Republican voters want to vote for a guy that is going to play nice with an administration that definitely does not play nice with them, with their values, and the people that champion those values for them. Let's hope that voters in the 5th Congressional District in the great state of Virginia renominate a conservative fighter to Congress in Bob Good and reject John McGuire, who would just be another controlled opposition establishment Republican in Congress. Because we need more people in Congress like Bob Good, not less. Since he is good for the voters in his district and great for America.